30 Years' War, History for Beginners, Circumstances, Course and Effects of the 30 Years' War and the Long Road to Peace. Written by Markus, Neustedt. Narrated by Wayman. What you can expect in this book. Dark clouds cast a shadow over 17th century Europe and color the continent in a dark fog. When they break out, a deluge of blood and sweat rolls over the countries, destroying landscapes and wiping out entire cities. There has never been a more merciless war in the history of Europe. Between state building and religious conflicts, soldiers are sent to certain death and villages are razed to the ground. But how well do we know the circumstances under which Europe is carried into disaster? How are the people who are directly affected by the consequences of war faring? The horror begins with a revolution that shakes the supremacy of the Habsburgs in Central Europe. More and more nations become entangled in the tangle of revenge and loyalty obligations. The newly emerged military enterprise made warfare a lucrative affair for princes and dukes. With the battles, the inhibitions against brutality and destructive mania faded. When the Catholic troops gather in front of the city walls of a Protestant stronghold, a devastating mass murder is in the offing. And when France and Spain declare war, the survival of the population is threatened. But what happens to the people who don't go into battle? The poverty-stricken population has to face an unusual enemy, their own nation. Testimonies from days gone by tell of the terrible crimes committed against women in the villages. Farmers lose more than they own in the face of war and almost work themselves to death. The situation is particularly dangerous when diseases spread and the funeral pyres are used again. The long road to peace is arduous and paved with cruelty. Almost half of the European population falls victim to the war. Impressions of their vices, the leading figures of the war, and the most important battles await you in this book. Europe's Dark Path. Poverty, hunger, and pestilence. What image do you have of 17th century Europe? Imagine how a war could come about. You will no doubt remember that the great world wars did not break out overnight, but were based on various events and conflicts in previous years. The 17th century is no different. Europe's path to an apocalyptic war began long before the so-called defenestration of Prague in 1618, traditionally understood as the outbreak of war. Various crises plague the European population in the decades leading up to the catastrophe and drive the continent down a dark path. Economic emergencies, religious and state conflicts, and disease harden the hearts and minds of all Europeans. From as early as the 1560s, exceptional climatic conditions are...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?